We close out February with this edition of Moral Side of the News, and we're glad you're with us. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel this week. Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany. Reverend Jason Crosby, Center College. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. And we welcome a new panelist this week, Father Toan, St. John the Apostle Catholic Church in Brandenburg. Welcome to you, panel. Our first topic. Access to a phone is something most of us take for granted, but a plan for a new phone system at Louisville Metro Corrections is aimed at improving mental health. Under this new plan, each person behind bars will be allowed 2 20-minute calls per day for free. So turning to our panel, let's hear your thoughts on helping the incarcerated stay better connected with that outside world.
I think it's a very good program, a very good thing. And we've learned a lot from the pandemic. But I have a question. I read through all of the data. I understand the free phone calls. I understand getting use of a tablet or whatever. But what I can't understand is the program costs $200,000. And who pays the $200,000? I read through it and I couldn't connect the dots.
Stan, if I'm not mistaken, the contract will be paid by Louisville Metro Corrections. I could be mistaken, but I don't think so. And if I'm not mistaken on another point, I believe that the total annual agreement was somewhere in the range of $450,000, which was $200,000 more than the next highest bid. So that was one detail that caught my attention. Was the fact that of the 4 bids that were solicited, this was hands down the most expensive, and to the tune of almost double that of the next amount. So just a point of clarification there. One other.
I thought I read somewhere later in the data that the $400,000 amount was subsequently discounted.
Well, please correct me if I am wrong.
I think my confusion came with it was discounted. So for what reason could it not have been offered for that price at the beginning? And with the discount, however, do the policies and do all of the services still stay complete, or was there some kind of tweaking? And my other wondering is, and the expense of this, is it because it offers much better services and more security for those who are using the services, as opposed to the others? I'd like to have seen more comparison there. But what I'm delighted about is seeing the opportunity for families, especially, to connect with those of their family members who are incarcerated. And having worked with children whose parents have been incarcerated, what a huge deal it is for them to hear their voice, since many of them could not go to the premises. So I'm delighted that there is that human element that is being added, and that human need that ways are being sought to fulfill.
I think if I might share a little bit what Stan said earlier, who pays, evidently it's the taxpayers, though the residents of Jefferson County, I suppose. And what surprised me much as I read the articles and the long discussion there, is how we all, or the government here, got bogged down in bureaucracy and administration. And also, another thing that they mentioned, the company, Smart Communication, I suppose, is one of them, or one of the bidders. They gives out the annual 3 seat for cruise and training things, and then the cost was, if I recall correctly, it was $21,000 package. And of course, it's all go back to the taxpayers. They raise the cost of the overall bid and take a little small sum out of it. So in the end, it's a lucrative things do in a way of doing business, I guess, to attract the customers here to Jefferson County. And I think, I mean, there must be a better way of doing it. I agree that inmates have some benefits from it, but in the end, the cost and the consequences that we all have to do also have to be taken into consideration.
When I just add, go ahead, Stan.
I'm just glad that all the aspects of this program are seeing the light of day for consideration.
Yeah, it is refreshing to have details, isn't it? That's nice. I guess one underlying subtext to this particular issue, and there are a variety of moral and ethical issues that are bundled into this particular matter, but what kept running through my mind is the fact that there has been this series of unfortunate deaths of folks that have been incarcerated in the Jefferson County Jail downtown. And the factors that precipitated those deaths are many and numerous and sundry. Anything, as Harriett was mentioning, that can be done to assist people with their mental health while incarcerated is very significant. Like I'm sure others, Stan and Reverend Toan and Harriett, in our roles as religious figures, we oftentimes find ourselves in communication with people who are in jail or in prison, and it is onerous, and even the previous means of communication via phone, not only was it expensive, it was in many respects dehumanized those that were incarcerated as well. It was difficult. It was complicated. The sound quality wasn't good. It was very difficult when receiving or placing a call from someone who was incarcerated to have a sense of connection. I understand that folks who find themselves in that position do have some limited freedoms, but at the same time, such isolation that could lead to deaths, which have unfortunately occurred in the jail, that needs to be mitigated as well. And hopefully this new system will assist with folks having a better sense of connection, not only to children, as Harriett said, but to other family and friends as people are navigating their way through the jail.
Another concern that arose out of this for me goes back to something that Father Toan said, and that is with who's paying for it, and the taxpayers, of course, and then remembering the last couple of years budget cuts and the need to have more officers and training. And so this is a big ticket item, but yet there were some concerns about budget in the past couple of years and salaries for those who serve us in our communities. So I don't know how to balance all that either. And that's a moral and ethical discussion of paying people what they are due for good work in the world, especially those who are first responders. It's a mixed bag.
All right, panel,
it really is.
Running on moral side of the news with our first topic. We'll move on to our second topic now. As you may recall, 3 students are dead in the wake of a recent shooting at Michigan State University. Now, universities across Kentucky and Indiana are reviewing their active shooter and emergency response plans. So let's turn to our panel. And panel, this must be considered a high priority for sure.
It's a high priority, not just for schools and colleges and universities. it's a high priority for those of us in the religious world. Protect. We never thought that we would need to protect our houses of worship. Now we need to protect our houses of worship. We need to have plans in place in case of God forbid. And I think that's a trans-denominational issue. It's not just synagogues, it's churches, it's mosques, it's all houses of worship. It's all religious institutions too. I read the article. I thought the article was interesting, but in the back of my mind, I worried that perhaps in this article there was too much information, and I wouldn't want that particular type of information to come across to someone who is in the process of planning an incident.
The way I see, thank you. The way I see the rising of crimes and violence in the U.S. in general and in the American culture, a little bit more particular, or in big cities, even more particular. I think our society has not done the job very well of educating people, because putting people in jail, as we discussed in the previous topic, and shooting, and then arrest them, prosecute them. And then the article pointed out that they try to look for university, or even Stan mentioned about churches and synagogues and mosques, houses of worship. We are doing not the preventative. I think the way it seems to me that we are doing bandage methods. We need to do better as a society to educate the young to adhere to the good and shun the bad. I remember when I was in my second years in college, I joined a group of other classmates to go to the LaGrange Reformatory I think it's in Oldham County. And we spent a whole week during Holy Week to visit with the inmates. And for example, we talked about the phone call earlier to help the mental health of the inmates. On the one hand, it is good, but also to educate the young people, even high school students, that being in jail is not a good thing. That will help them plant the seed of awareness in their minds, so that when they grow up, they try to avoid what is bad and adhere to what is good, rather than doing, calling or checking out all of these universities in the greater Louisville areas to find out what the methods or the procedure to prevent further shooting. All of those for me is Band-Aid. Our society need to start with family first to educate the young, and the school can do a better job at that.
Well, I'll just jump in as one who is sitting on a college campus at the moment, and just underscore the fact that this issue was not one that colleges and universities in our area, region, across the state, Indiana, have not prepared for. Certainly at Center, it is something that is considered on a regular basis, and that students, faculty, and staff are regularly reminded of means of communication in the event of some sort of active aggressor or some other sort of emergency on campus. And so that's just a part of the regular rhythm and flow of life on a college campus, be it here in Kentucky, be it in Lansing, East Lansing, Michigan, wherever you find yourselves. And Stan, yes, that includes houses of worship. And so I think that just points us to the larger issue, which is that whenever we find ourselves in a place that is not tightly secured in a college setting or in a place of worship that is seeking to be hospitable, that is largely open to the public, we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable. Unfortunately, you combine that vulnerability, you combine what Reverend Tran was mentioning about some of the lack of education and awareness about the consequences of one's action, with the proliferation of guns and accessibility to guns. It's a deadly and dangerous cocktail. One other aspect of this story that I lament, and I raise this because I do believe that the only way that we can collectively address this is if we're able to step back and understand the ways in which this is having significant impact on the lives of not just the individuals that were affected in Lansing at Michigan State, but on a whole generation of young people. There was a young woman who attends Michigan State who found herself on lockdown, who was a student at Sandy Hook when that occurred more than a decade ago. And I think about my own children who attend JCPS schools, 12-year-old, sixth grader, and a fourth grader. They regularly go through active shooting drills. And I know that we've mentioned this on this show before, but the reality is that this is a whole generation of young people. Yes, education is a component, but the adults also bear responsibility for what is being subjected upon future generations. And in some respects, at this point, it's just sickening, because there is so much that can be done that would not violate an individual's ability to have access to weapons, that is in keeping with the Second Amendment, but that is protecting people's physical well-being as well as their emotional and mental well-being. And I think we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg in terms of the ways in which this is going to have generational effects upon us as a society.
And how many more before we get to the point where we say enough is enough, and so we stop and really make the changes instead of doing the Band-Aid, the Band-Aid ministry and the Band-Aid recovery. The other piece that's hard to balance with all of that is the vulnerability of hospitality, is to continue to offer that which, as religious leaders, we want to offer and believe in. And where else would we want people to feel welcome, all people to feel welcome, and at the same time have the responsibility, the heavy responsibility to keep them safe? I'm really wrestling with that, and have been.
When Isaiah said, "My house is a house of prayer for all people," he didn't have to contend with the specter of an active shooter.
Right.
Okay, panel, we're going to move on to our third topic on Moral Side of the News this week. There are about 10 minutes left in our program. It's not often that video of a prayer group goes viral, but that's just what happened at Asbury University in Wilmore, Kentucky. It will end its 2-week nonstop revival this week and offer nighttime services only to college and high school age students. Many people traveled from different states after seeing the prayer group on TikTok. So many, in fact, the university had to make changes to handle the overwhelming response. So turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News, it's nice to hear people flocking to pray.
My first reaction to that, as a surprise to me, but also my first reaction to that was that there are still many human beings out there who yearn for meaning for their lives. TikTok will not answer that, or any social media platform will not answer that. What I mean for yearning for the meanings of life is their spiritual well-being, their emotional growth, and all of the things that help them grow internally, not the things that TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or any of those platforms can provide. And meaning of life here, as we see in this example, is an internal yearning for something that is better.
I'm wondering what will be the fruit of this time of prayer, and how will that be lived out and be seen in acts of service and an attitude. We come down from the holy mountain of prayer and have to get back to work. My spiritual director says, after the enlightenment, the laundry. So we got to come back to do what needs to be done. And so I'm wondering, hoping that they will get good counsel on that and how to balance, got to go to class and write that term paper, as well as lean into this new understanding of my faith and this new desire, thirst to pray. It's exciting. And it will be interesting to see how it turns out.
Historically, isn't Asbury geographically a part of the world that really spurred the first set of revivals, the Great Awakening in the early 19th century?
Yes, that Methodist revival that swept through, and then again in the 1970s, they had the same kind of experience. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, I again, from the vantage point that I have from a college campus, I can just say that I don't envy those in positions of leadership and responsibility on Asbury's campus, or the Asbury Police Department, or others that somewhat spontaneously found themselves in the midst of a national and international event. This was certainly garnering attention and attracting people from across the country and world to Central Kentucky. Asbury's just about 25 miles from where I sit, on the other side of the Kentucky River from where I am, and there are folks in Boyle County, Mercer County, I know, that own some Airbnb properties, and they were unexpectedly getting all sorts of requests from all across the country for folks that were coming in. It appears that over the course of the past 2+ weeks that the college has done a good job in community of being hospitable. To circle back around to our previous point of the conversation, I also do appreciate the fact that they are putting a sunset on it now, because it is onerous. I mean, it takes a lot of work to make an event like that happen, where so many thousands upon thousands of people are flocking. And yes, Harriett, I would just underscore what you mentioned, that revival is essential. And you said after illumination comes laundry. It reminded me of after a delightful vacation, there's always the vacation after your vacation that you need to pick up the pieces, right? And yes, in the wake of any sort of spiritual enlightenment that's motivated by any of our faith traditions, in an ideal context and setting, it will have tangible effects that generate more loving, more just, more peaceful communities, not just in Asbury, not just in Central Kentucky, not just in the state of Kentucky, but well beyond. Revival comes in many shapes and sizes. There's the revival of the sort that happened in Asbury, that was worship-driven, prayer-driven, song-driven, testimony shared. But revival also comes in the shape of needed social change that better reflects the vision cast for our world that Jesus espoused, for instance. So there are other ways that revival needs to happen beyond what has occurred in Asbury.
Since we're talking about this and the point you bring up, I have a question. And of course, at this point in time, a lot of us are thinking about President Jimmy Carter. Would Habitat for Humanity be considered a manifestation of this type of revivalism?
Well, Stan, I'll take a crack at that, and others certainly please chime in. I mean, I appreciate you bringing former President Carter into this conversation. I've been reading some interesting reflections on his life in the wake of the announcement last weekend that he's entering hospice care. One of the more interesting pieces that I read had to do with the fact that it was his evangelical upbringing and his religious formation in an early age that was steeped in Southern religiosity that I think, although he was in a Baptist context, this Methodist context, there are direct parallels. It was that sort of upbringing and that sort of formation that then led him, in particular post-presidency, to dedicate his life to the work of organizations like Habitat for Humanity, the work that he poured into the Carter Center, and the work he's done for peace in Israel, Palestine. So yes, from where I sit, to answer your question, there is a linkage between that spiritual spark, certainly that he had experienced at different points through his life, and then the work that he did. So thank you, Stan. That's my perspective. Others might have a different take.
That same sort of event happened with Heifer International. A man went to World War II, came back, and a farmer started this whole worldwide experience of feeding the world and helping them help themselves.
Well, that'll bring to a close this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you to our panel, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Reverend Jason Crosby, Rabbi Stan Miles, and welcome to you, Father Toan. If you'd like to watch the program again, it's available anytime on YouTube. Just jump on YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. So thank you, panel. Until next time, the conversations will continue here on Moral Side of the News. So long. In just a few months, we'll celebrate the 70th annual WHAS Crusade for Children. And there's something special. You could win a kitchen full of GE appliances. Just go to WHAScrusade.org. That's WHAScrusade.org. And purchase a raffle ticket to win a kitchen full of GE appliances. Refrigerator, microwave, dishwasher, and stove. All from GE appliances. Just go to WHAScrusade.org and see all the many ways you can help change a child's life. You can catch this program again anytime on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. Until next time, have a great week. So long.